This was originally started out to be a beauty channel, and which it still is, for us older women, or men, or anybody who wants to watch. But I also wanted to make it a poetry channel about my dad. My dad was very famous, and before he died, I promised him that I would publish his poems in a book. His poems were always published back in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s in the Washington Post. And this is the Washington Post here. Washington Post. I haven't really read many of his poems. I'm going to read you a small one today and then just tell you, this came from a website that you can look up my father, and it tells you everything about my father. And this is the least I can do for him since I did not make a book for him. I don't know how to publish a book without, I think it's pretty expensive, so I really never, I checked into it once or twice. I think my son did. I couldn't afford it, and I promised him on his deathbed that I would make an entire book of his poems. My father was a great poet. He was known as the poet laureate of Capitol Hill. He worked for the Capitol. I used to go to work with him loads of times in the underground tunnels that they'd have, which I presume they still do have. And when I was little, he worked there for 40 years. He retired at age 61. I was married at that age, in 1977. Some of it's here. I want to read you a little poem that my father wrote that I would really like to start off every day. And my dad just wrote this poem. It's not from the Bible. It's just my dad's poem. It says, I thank thee, Father, for this day. May I live it just your way. And give me, Father, a chance today to help another along their way. And say something that and hope something. This was ripped. As you can see, it's so old. Mine is shaky, wobbly hands. And most say something that I say or do, help another have faith in you. Jack Bernstein. Sorry, I'm missing a fingernail. I had to tape it together. It's old. So many, I lent my father's poems when my husband was young to his sister, which I think she copied some of and lost them. And she passed away, and she lost some of the poems. My daughter, who was not diagnosed with relapsing polycarditis at that time, made some copies, handwritten copies that I have in my closet. And then we lent them to our family doctor that we had back in 1960, who is now retired. And he kept them for quite a while and then returned them to me. But some of them are handwritten from my daughter, because I think some of them the doctor or someone might have kept or misplaced or something. I don't know what happened to it. I shouldn't have done that. I should have just kept them all together, as many as I still have, as many as I can find all together. But there were so many published in magazines. I'm sorry, I'm sitting on my bed on the heating pad, so if you're a little shaky, this is from my bed. I have all these little things around. After this, I'm going to watch Dreamscapes, so the relaxing music, just because I'm going to need it. This is not enough for me to do for my father. Now that I'm older in life, and I don't know how much time I have left, I'm not very healthy. But this is the least I can do, is to read something about him or let you look it up. It was a friend of my daughter's sent it to me, and it was in the Washington Post. And this was it's like 7 pages long about my dad, so I can't read it all to you. It would drive you crazy. I talk enough as it is. This was the Washington Post, December 22nd, 1977. This is just some of it. My father's nickname was Jack the Rapper, because he owned the whole rapping department for all the senators. We used to have senators as I was a child. I remember coming over to our house for dinner. We had a famous painting in our house. I think my father sold to one of his friends for $20, and it's now in a national museum. There were so many things left behind, like my father had a plaque from, I believe, Senator Humphrey made him. It's somewhere in here. I'll just read a little bit of it. Jack the Rapper. Now that winter is here, the days are getting longer, but not for Jack Bernstein. My name was originally pronounced Wittgenstein in German. The process began 20 months ago. At 61, Bernstein retired. As a retiree of the time hangs heavy. The days he spent great globs of time living in his living room. He now writes a little, takes a little, tinkers a little. My dad worked around the house, but he is kidding no one. He leaves all of that on himself. I miss it, he says. I miss it. He worked there for 40 years. And he took me to work with him most of my childhood. Probably some of the people, if they're still alive, remember me. Shut down. But least of all himself. I miss it, he says. I miss it a whole lot. While he might have after 40 years, he was one of the senators. Lots of all by himself. He made a name for himself. Everyone loved my dad, especially my dad had senators, like I say, come to our house. He was a pal of Senator Dirksen. He was an admirer of Senator Russell's. Sometimes they would go out and have dinner and drinks together, and he wouldn't mention any of the names of the people. He wasn't a drunk. They'd just go out and have drinks, but he didn't. Back in those times, they didn't want anybody to know they had drinks, I guess. But he was most of all processor of one of the most distinctive names of all time, Jack the Rapper, which was his specialty. He was the boss of the Senate folding room. He wrapped packages for 40 years. He wrote to anything. There was a thing on his table that said, just leave it on my desk, I'll take care of it. He one time shipped 2 kittens. I faintly remember this. I believe I was at work with my dad when this happened. I was really little. He shipped 2 kittens for one of the senators, and they just gave him the cat, so he designed a box and put holes in it himself and made it all fancy for Vice President Nixon. This was for Vice President Nixon. He was the Vice President at the time. My son has letters upstairs that were signed by Nixon. A letter from Humphrey. We have the United States Senate emblems, cufflinks from the President of the United States that they sent my dad. Lots of little things like that. A letter that's a little dilapidated, but my son still has it, that my mother gave to my son, but some of the plaques have been lost. And he did that for Vice President Nixon. His name was the Poet Laureate of Capitol Hill. That's what my father's was called by everyone. There was a line, for example, when some genius landscaper, this was a true story that was also written up in, I believe, the Washington Post, and several other magazines, that they decided to change the landscaping for the Capitol. And it was all changed because of my father. His name was the Poet Laureate of Capitol Hill. There was a time, for example, when some genius landscaper that they had hired decided to plant trees on the first northeast street sides of the Capitol, I presume. A gardener was digging a hole in the ground, when Senator Harrison Williams drifted by and said, hey, you can't do that. So they had to move it. He said, come on, this is Jack's luncheon spot. This is where he has ate lunch for 40 years. So the senator put a stop to that, and the trees were rearranged. He also asked, he was a runner, he also asked my dad to run with him. Well, my dad wasn't very healthy, so my father said, I'm lucky to walk, much less run, which was true. Same goes for me. Somebody's chasing me, I think they're going to win, unless the dog's with me. Then came, of course, there were I didn't even understand my father. See, I have arthritis so bad I can't write. My father's last day at the Senate, when he decided to retire because he had a stroke at his desk. My dad did. Where Robert P. Griffin rose to speak, and this went in the congressional records. This what he said went into the congressional records at the time. To speak to the Congress Record Board. He didn't miss a syllable, as usual. Here's some of what Mr. Griffin said. Jack is the man who took great pride in his work. He distinguished himself. We all do wish him Godspeed, and that was put in the congressional records because my father was retiring at 61. The entire list of Griffin's remarks hangs and in a bronzed case on my father's living room wall. That I didn't get either. When my mom passed away, I was told I had less than 48 hours to clean out my mother's house. I obviously left that behind too because I was in shock that my mom had passed. My dad had already passed. I don't know if my mom packed my dad's stuff away or what happened. But he closed it, Senator Griffin did, in a thank you note, for also was written by hand by Hubert Humphrey. That was the closest thing my dad had to him at the time, and he kept that in his closet. And that my son still has to this day. Humphrey wrote, "You're such a good friend. You're such a good friend." My father's best friend was Senator Jamie Allen. His most effective senator was John F. Kennedy. I think they had the Allen name. I can't even read my own writing because I can't use my thumbs to write. John F. Kennedy was also a friend of my father's. We have pictures of my father used to go to parties at Kennedy's house. And I had a picture of my father sitting on the front lawn with some other guests. And I don't even know if it's still upstairs in the closet. Moved into here. I think so many things got lost, but I'm pretty sure that's still up there somewhere. It's an old picture, and you can see my dad as clear as day in a group of other people in President Kennedy's lawn. My dad suffered a stroke at the Senate office building in March of 1976. He had a stroke at his desk, and that's when he left work. From then on, I can't read the rest of it, it's too long, but you can look it up. My father stayed home, and he did charity work for the church around back from us. He'd take care of anything they needed, even though he was not healthy and had a stroke himself. He would go every Sunday, and he would take my oldest daughter, who has relapsing polycarditis. He would take her to church with him every Sunday. My dad would drive him, I believe it was an old Hudson, and pick her up and take her to church with him. She remembers so much of that. My son, Daniel, the one I live with, he never got to meet my father. You can show a picture of my father with many other men, and my son will pick him right out. My mother used to say they passed each other as my father died less than 6 days before my son was born. Daniel. I was pregnant with Daniel, and we found out my father had cancer everywhere. He was kind of like me, I'm mule-headed, and he wouldn't get a test done. And I finally insisted that he have tests done because he'd been so weak and tired. So I made him go to the doctors, and they ran all kinds of tests. And when they did, they found out at 61 years of age, he was eaten up with cancer. And we never knew he had any kind of cancer. I kind of hated myself for even making him go to the doctors, but he was supposed to come home the day that he died. It was the day he was supposed to come home. I was pregnant with Daniel. I came to pick my father up that morning. He knew he had cancer. but they were letting him go home. I came to pick him up pregnant, and as I went to push open his door, a nurse jumped in front of me and said, "The doctor needs to see you." And it was probably one of the worst days of my life. I was 9 months pregnant with Daniel. And the day before that, my dad told me that he had saved all kinds of money for me in the National Credit Bureau, but I never found it. I never found it. I don't know if it's still there. I don't even know. My husband supposedly checked, but my father would never have lied, so I don't know what happened to that money. But he said he had a savings account set aside for me, and my father never lied to me, but I never did see that money. Or I would have published a book and everything for him, but anyway, my father died the day I came to pick him up. I don't remember the doctor's name. I remember it came up with H. I literally hit the doctor because I was supposed to pick him up and take him home. I actually slapped the doctor in the face, and then they made me lay down for a while. I was shaking so bad. I'll never forget that. I left without my dad, so my son Daniel never saw my dad. I went to his funeral pregnant, and I had very sick. I had had funerals. My father's funeral was huge. I mean, it was just nothing but senators, but I barely remember. Most of them spoke to me. Just senators for miles and miles with lights on. Fort Lincoln Cemetery. In chauffeur-driven cars. It was really terrible. But anyway, I just want to read you some of his poems, and if you need to know any of this makeup that I'm wearing today, I'll be more than happy to tell you. And I have a massive amount of hair today, don't I? It's that $12 thing added to my own hair that I showed you. I swear I love it so much. My son said for me to get another one in blonde, so this whole part will be blonde, because it just blends in with, this is my own hair. This is all my own hair, but this is it. This is the hair piece that was $12 that I put a link to in the previous video. Anyway, I'm sorry I made this so long. I just wanted to honor my father a little bit, because time is so short, you never know when I may never have another chance to tell you about my father again. And I didn't write in the book. I at least owe him that much. God bless you all. Thank you for listening this long. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. And we're going to go through some more poems of my dad's, along with a lot of beauty tips, things I've discovered. Cover our lip lines, because I'm almost 75. And I think I've done a pretty good job today of covering the lines. I used concealer all over my lips, or no, I used the MAC eye base, and then I put powder on, and then that Revlon lipstick. And I have a stain coming in from Amazon that I'd like to try with you next too. And some tricks about some of my friends said that they couldn't do the cat eye. Well, this is a new eyeshadow palette called the Wonka Bar. Oh my gosh, it smells like chocolate. It is such a good, beautiful, beautiful colors. And something else I want to show you that eyeshadow. Oh, well, one of my friends said she can't do the cat eye, so I didn't want to go through all that trouble of doing the wing and all that for you. You can just use this thing for the cat eye. This is the NYX. It comes in different colors. My son grabbed me this one. Each end has a lighter color and a darker color. And you can just do the cat eye with this. I'll show you the next time. You don't have to do anything else. Just use this, and use this for your contour too. We don't have to contour on our face is already contoured. But you just sweep the light part here and the dark part here, and then just take your finger and blend it up. And if you want to just use some eyeshadow right here, same thing, blend it up. I'll show you. That's all you have to do. You don't have to buy expensive eyeshadow palettes. Or use the ones you have, like today. I used this Wonka, and I just loved it. I especially loved the chocolate smell. So sorry I bored you to death. God bless you. Have a wonderful week.